Welcome to Man Up, the podcast by men, about men, and for men who are striving to be better fathers, husbands, leaders, and followers of Jesus. Are you ready? Man up.
Yes, sir!
Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Jared Bowman, and this is Man Up, your podcast with all the encouragement that you need to be a better father, husband, leader, and follower of Jesus. We're a band of brothers. We're soldiers. We're comrades in arms. We fight side by side, shoulder to shoulder, hand over hand, and mile after mile until each of us has helped the others attain the high calling of Jesus. And today we are joined by two brothers in arms. We have Dr. Kenny Embry and Keith the Legend Stonehart. So we have got a show for you today. We are focused on young men today. Young men who are entering the dating world, young men who are entering the world of marriage, and young men, in keeping with the genre of the program here, who are focusing on becoming fathers. We're going to be talking about some of the pitfalls that we run into, some of the bad advice that we've heard. We're going to try to give you a little better advice from the school of hard knocks. But before we jump into this, Dr. Kenny Embry has got something special for you guys. It is the second year of the Balancing the Christian Life lectureship, and it is coming up in July. That there's even a free admission if you early register for that, and then there's also, I think, some packages that he wants to tell you a little bit about that with paid admissions. But Kenny, why don't you take a minute and tell us a little bit about what's happening at the end of July?
Oh, sure. As a matter of fact, one of my keynote speakers is right here, and that's Keith.
Hey, it's me.
The Legend Stonehart.
That's exactly right.
It's me.
The conference itself is basically an idea where I'm trying to validate an idea, which is this, that online stuff can be done well and can be an encouragement. Everything's going to be recorded, and anybody who wants to participate, there's no cost to entry. So the two packages that you're talking about, one of them is, Kenny, we know this is going to cost you something out of pocket. Here's just me giving you a little bit of money to do that, and that's fine. And if you can't do that does not need to be a barrier to entry to you. There's two other levels above that, which are a book. The first one, Adam Shanks and I have been getting essays to put together a conference book, and so we have not even started on it yet. We have not gotten all the essays yet. But that said, we'll go ahead and pull that together. The highest level is a $100 level, where I've talked to three people about giving me a special price on a book that they've written. So it'll be the conference book and three other books. So it's a good deal. I like that. But that said, it's something that I have a lot of strong feelings about. So far, right now, we have 45 different speakers lined up. The schedule is available at balancingthechristianlife.com. There's something there that says Balancing the Christian Life Conference 2023. So that's where you would find all information on it. And again, you'll be able to participate in everything at the free level. So I just encourage everybody to go ahead and sign up for it.
Well, it sounds like something. Yeah, absolutely. Keith Legend Stonehart seconds that. And for the Man Up audience, one of the tracks on this year's lectureship is about being better Christian men, and it is focusing on things like toxic masculinity. Yeah. I know we've got BJ Sipe talking about being a good husband. Right. We've got my co-host for the Biblically Speaking podcast, Brian Haynes, talking about becoming the man after God's own heart. We've got Devin Harbour in there. We've got Chris Huntley, a lot of guys that are going to be joining on that track. I think we've got 6 different speakers on that track, if memory serves. I should know because that's my track that I'm organizing for you.
You're in charge of
but, well, I know that I'm 2 of them because I really wanted to talk about stress and toxic masculinity. But then, I mean, just there's a track that's specifically for women. You've got a textual track. I mean, just so many different options. It's not just Bible teaching. There's life teaching in there. There's all kinds of things, but it's all going to be biblically based. And so if you're a man and you've got some free time at the end of July and you would like to to be encouraged, I would encourage you to register ahead of time and take advantage of either that, of any of those options. There's the free option. There's the, hey, Kenny, we want to kick you a little bit of money. And then there's the 2 book options that he mentioned. And I know I'm looking forward to being part of this, and others are as well. So we want to thank Kenny for giving us that information. And once it's post-July, we will edit this out.
Okay, that's fine.
But it is the podcast it's time for us in this podcast to talk about men. And I know there's just a lot of bad advice out there. We live in a time of great cultural upheaval. In fact, I was talking with somebody about this the other day, and I wonder if you guys would agree. I don't think we've seen this kind of cultural upheaval that we're seeing right now since probably the mid-1960s. Is the last time we saw this much influx, where you've got kind of not just a generational divide, a divide between men and women. You've got a divide between you've got kind of a rethinking of morality at the same time. I know I don't remember seeing this in the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s, because I'm 46 and I'm getting old now. I realize I'm on the downhill side of things, but for most of my life, I definitely feel like the last 3 or 4 years have been sort of a time of great social change and upheaval. And one of the consequences is guys are having trouble navigating those transition points in their life. And so as I'm thinking about our audience, I want to think about advice we could be giving to fathers as their sons transition into the dating life, or young men. If we happen to have any young men listening to Man Up, then we'll talk to them directly. But that's the first one that I want to really get out there and talk to, is that first sort of transition where you go from being a little kid to you're contemplating your first few your first few I guess experiences with testosterone running through your veins. You start to think about girls not as icky, but as something you'd like to spend a little bit of time with.
Right.
That's kind of a confusing area for a lot of guys right now. A lot of young guys are having trouble navigating those relationships because of the societal changes. What's some of the bad advice that you've heard? What's some of the pitfalls you've seen? And what are some pieces of good advice we could impart? Just jump ball, guys.
Go ahead, Stonehart.
Well, I've got camp starting Saturday, and so I've been, we always go through a series of conversations at camp with the young guys, because this very thing, the 8th, 9th grade guys, they're fully aware of who the girls are now. The 6th and 7th and even the 5th and 6th grade guys are starting to notice. They don't know what any of that means yet, but they're paying attention. And so there are a series of conversations that we have with each age group, and it's very different from the 12th graders to the 6th graders. But in essence, there is a fundamental teaching that I think goes back to the Bible, that all of the fundamental relationship advice, I think, should come from the Bible. And that is, number one, is that they are your sister in Christ. Even if you're not a Christian yet, they were made in God's image. They are God's daughters. And there is a level of respect that then comes with that place in the kingdom. And we live in a hyper sexually charged society right now. I hate to sound like an old guy, but back when I was a kid.
Oh, you totally do, man.
Yeah. Anytime you preface,
but you're a rock legend, right?
It's immediately. But when I was a kid, we didn't have this, right? There was no. I didn't have the internet at my fingertips where pornography could even find me, right? Pornography was something that you stumbled upon in your dad's closet, right? I mean, it was something that you found someone had an old stash of magazines out in the woods or something crazy like that, right? But the point is that you had to be intentional about going and getting it. And now kids can be scrolling through Twitter looking for the latest football scores, and hey, there's a video that they weren't looking for, right? It's one of those things that it's dangerous. I mean, and I think pornography is still an experiment that we don't exactly know how it's going to turn out. But I know this, it's shaping the way our young men, as young as these 4th and 5th grade boys, it's shaping the way they view women. It's shaping the way they view the sexual relationship. It's shaping the way that they approach the whole thing. It's very non-personal. They don't see these as other people, but they see them as a means to an end. And so, believe it or not, the conversation has to start early about respecting what God created. And I think that has to come first. That if you're getting your sex education and your relationship advice from TikTok, then we're in trouble. And so it has to come first from us. And I think as men, as fathers, we have to take the initiative. We have to have those conversations. We were just talking about off air. It's Pride Month, and there's a whole subculture of people that are coming after our kids. They were chanting it at a Pride parade just recently. That we're coming for your kids, and that's always been the agenda. I mean, that we know that's as much as a lot of the talking heads will downplay that perspective. We know that they want to come. They want to convert kids. And for no other reason. It's to. It's almost like a stab or a shot at straight Christian parents who are raising Christian kids. They want to pull them from us almost out of spite. Well, probably not almost. I think it is. But I'm just saying that to say that there are a lot of places where kids can get their information, and we first have to take the initiative and say, listen, God created this person just like He created you, and that comes with a already set amount of respect and dignity. And so you establish that boundary right up front, I think, and then you can build into some of the other things that I think we're going to talk about. But I think that has to come first.
One of the things that I've noticed is sort of the mainstreaming of pornography in the last few years, that it's really sort of moved away from seedy magazines that guys would go into gas stations in the bad part of town to buy.
Yeah.
And now it's become almost legitimized in a way. Like the OnlyFans accounts and things like that I didn't even know what that was until I started hearing about teachers getting fired for filming OnlyFans material on the school website or on school grounds.
Yeah.
And you come to find out anybody can go and open one of those accounts, and there's no shame. Everybody who does that knows that those pictures and those videos are going to live on the internet forever, and there's no shame in it anymore. And I think one of the worst things that's happening right now is you've got this overabundance of availability of sexual content, but you also have a kind of a new ethos that's moving through, particularly the young women, of you need to approach sex more the way that young men would have approached sex 10 years ago, which is, play the field kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's really wrecking, in some cases, the clear path to marriage and family. And I was reading an article the other day that the average age for marriage in our country had increased. I forget what the number was. I think it was something like 27 or 28.
Yeah.
Was like the average considered earliest age that people are getting married now. And that's because many are skewing into their mid 30s after, the women have had their sexual escapades, and then nobody, no what they call the high value man, the 6'6", the 6 foot, 6 pack, 6-figure man, would want them anymore because they've sown their wild oats. Well, now they're going to settle down for the nice guy, and then a lot of them are just starting a family and then taking him to the cleaners kind of thing. And it is the self-service as you enter that phase of your life, that it's all about you, that it's really, I have to have this right now. I would tell most young people to really stop and figure out who you are before going into that dating area. Because I mean, there's a lot of, you hear about guys all the time. Well, I'm not having any success with women. Well, somebody's going to go out there and say, well, have you thought about, are you gay? And you have those moments of reflection that aren't true moments of reflection. They're more a reflection of where we're at as a society than who that individual is. That's sort of, it's causing a lot of doubt and a lot of bad, not just bad advice, but it's causing them to contemplate things in a way that, if a girl shot me down 20 years ago, well, Lauren and I have been married 20 years, so if a girl shot me down 30 years ago, wow, then it would, okay, well, that's just, she didn't want to go out with me. Well, now it makes, because of the climate, it sort of makes guys question the whole
thing,
the whole idea of dating. Yeah. Kenny, you look like you got something.
You started this by asking about good and bad advice we've gotten. Let me just give you some advice if you're a guy. Yes, you have testosterone coursing through your veins, and that's a double-edged sword, like everything is. That makes you aggressive. So what is the object of your aggression going to be? What are you going to fight for? And I think that's one of the things because fighting for something is perfectly legitimate in some instances. What are you going to fight for? And we've talked about Jordan Peterson before, and I'll reinvoke his name again. The fact of the matter is, you need to be a man of strength. You need to be a man of both a man of strength and a man of purpose. Because once you have a purpose, then you have a way to productively channel your strength. If you decide to remain weak, to remain somebody who doesn't try anything, you're a weak person, and you're not doing anybody any good. If, on the other hand, you're going to be a man and you're going to have strength, go out, take chances. That means get out from behind the PS5 and ask a girl out, a real flesh and blood girl. And let me go ahead and tell you, and I am the digital advocate. I think that some people learn how to talk to girls online, and they can translate that into a face-to-face relationship. What a wonderful way to use this digital technology to learn a set of skills that translate to another context. Do that.
Mm-hmm.
But some people get so enamored of the technology they never leave it, and that's a danger. And look, the fact of the matter is, I've only met Stonehart twice in the flesh, but the thing about it is he became a good friend of mine before I met him.
Oh yeah,
in the flesh.
Yeah.
Same with you, Jared. But I've never met you in the flesh. Thank goodness for
We've never
these.
even been on the same side of the country.
That's exactly right. Thank goodness for these digital technologies that everybody wants to find the problems with, and they're there.
Yeah.
But thank goodness for these things that have such good applications to them. So use them for that. Now, again, let me jump back to, you ask for good advice. Take good chances where you do not know the outcome. Ask the girl out. See if she's interested. And when she's not, move on to the next one. Because you can fixate. You can become so enamored of one thing that if that doesn't materialize, you fall apart. That, again, is weakness. Everybody listening to this, I'm going to guess, knows about Andrew Tate. And the thing about Andrew Tate that I like is he's diagnosing a problem. Do I like his solutions? Yeah. Most of his solutions I don't particularly care for. But I think one of the things he's recognizing is that men do better when they're strong, when they take risks, when they try some, and don't misinterpret this, but try some stupid stuff that they didn't know if it would work or not. Because I promise you, when I was this age, I was stupid. I didn't have all the information that I do now at 53. But now that I'm 53, I wouldn't do, I know different things to try. You got to learn to, God called men to be strong and courageous. And I hate that we have basically made them weak and timid. And I think that's a danger. And nobody, especially Women who want a strong leader profits from weak and timid men.
Well, and I think that's the best piece of advice right there is you need to be looking for a woman who is looking for a man of strength. That a lot of guys are taught that women want a more feminine version of a man. That I was hearing, I can't remember if it was a podcast or if it was an article I was reading the other day, but that our society, it was a podcast. What actress was talking about this? It's one of the women in the MC. I think it was it Evangeline Lilly that from the MCU. I think that she was talking about how our society wants women to behave like traditional men, and that's celebrated. But men are beaten into behaving like, if they express the traditional male role, then they are called toxic, and they are not celebrated unless they behave in a more feminine way.
Well, listen, and that's absolutely true.
Find somebody that's not playing that game. I mean, that's the piece of advice right there. Find somebody that isn't playing that game.
Well, and
it's not going to be the girl that's reading the Cosmo or anything like that. Just I don't know if they still read Cosmo, but yeah. Find somebody that's not playing that game.
You know, that's what our boys are up against. You go back and watch the first Iron Man movie. Speaking of the MCU,
yeah.
Go back and watch the first Hulk movie. Not the terrible one with Eric Bana, but the one with Edward Norton. Watch that Hulk movie versus the latest incarnation of the Hulk in the She-Hulk series per se. Not even close. You had a raging beast that could still be tamed, right?
Yeah.
He could still bring it under control in the right circumstances, and it was his woman that was able to bring him back to reality, right? Well, now Hulk's wearing glasses, you know, and he's a kinder, gentler Hulk, right? He's not the raging beast in the first movie. He's this quirky sort of nerd guy. And I know the comic books had Professor Hulk, and I'm not, you know.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is if you watch that movie to this, it's not just the Hulk. Watch the first Iron Man movie. You know, you had a guy who was a playboy, which not to be celebrated, but what I'm saying is that's the way they portrayed him.
Yeah.
You know, versus how it all ended. Look at Thor. Watch the first Thor movie to the latest Thor movie, and you had a very domineering masculine Viking, and now you've got a guy that's that he the way they write him now is every other line is a self-deprecating joke, and it just goes to show you that that's the shift that you're talking about in our culture. That it went from, hey, these guys were like larger than life heroes, and now they're sissied, right? We've got sissied versions of those heroes. You know, when I bring that up with someone, they're like, "Oh, you're just going on about," and I'm not. I'm not going on about nothing. I'm awake enough to notice, the shift, and so eventually Lily, she, believe it or not, she caught a lot of flack for that statement, right?
Yeah.
She caught a lot of backlash for that statement, like anyone in that circle of the world and influence does when they purport some sort of conservative or traditional idea.
Yeah.
But that's all that to say.
I don't even know that she's all that conservative. But it is a traditional idea.
Yeah. And the thing is that our boys that are growing into men don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
If they don't start getting some good advice. And I agree with Kenny. I think that's probably some of the best advice we could give our young men is take the risk. Right? Ask her out. Right? One of the things that we tell our boys at camp, we're like, listen, if you're going to ask a girl out, do not text her. Do not DM her. Don't go to her Instagram and DM her. You ask her to her face. And that's one of the things I love about what we do at camp. We take their phones away. And so these kids have no choice but to talk to each other all week. And what's amazing is, on Sunday when everyone shows up, even if you know these kids from last year, it's a little awkward. And by Friday, they're arm in arm singing hymns together, and they're crying because they're going to miss each other. They've developed this super strong bond from this person to person contact. And I agree with Kenny. Even over the digital age and the internet forum, we can develop. I mean, Kenny and I have had a good cry, on talking about various topics like this, because we're still face to face. There's still a human connection here. But the point is that our boys don't stand a chance if we don't encourage them to take some risks. That's part of what makes being a man great. If you go back and look through history, all the great men in history took risks. Look through the Bible. They took risks, right? They put themselves in situations that, you know what, could have gone horribly wrong, but they didn't. And the outcome was something great. And when it comes to relationships, what could be greater, right? What could be greater than, hey, man, take the risk. Ask her. What's she going to do? Punch you? I mean, probably not. But she will say no, probably. And if she does, okay. You're not going to die if she says no. I mean, nothing bad happens to you. You take that and you go, okay, she's not the one.
Right.
And you move on, and I can remember, I recently did a podcast about this, on my solo thing that I'm doing. And I talked about the first time I realized the need for human connection. And there was a girl that was visiting her grandmother who lived behind me. She lived in up north somewhere. She was down visiting for the summer. And like kids do, you find each other out in the yard, I'm out in the yard. She's out in the yard. Of course, you eventually make a connection. She was a year older than me. This is between my 7th and 8th grade year. She was between her 8th and 9th grade year.
Oh, she was an older woman.
Oh, yeah. And so my dad worked graveyard shifts. So he would go to work at like 11, and he'd work till 7 in the morning or whatever. My mom would go to bed at 9. So basically from 9 o'clock on, I'm unattended, right? I'm Generation X. We were feral, raising ourselves.
Still are.
That's right. But I'm sitting there, and she shows up at my patio door. Scared me to death at first because there's another human being standing outside. That's the thing that horror movies are built on, right?
Yeah.
But
girls are what horror movies are about, Keith.
Well, they always are. So
it's never a little boy that comes out of the television.
It's never a little boy. It's always a little girl.
I think Davian was the one exception.
Yeah. So she invites me out, and I'm going to make this short, I promise. And so I go out, and we go lay on her back patio, just looking at the night sky. Nothing nefarious, nothing scandalous goes on here. I'm a 12, 13-year-old boy. She's a 13, 14-year-old girl. We lay there talking, and she's telling me about some of the things that she deals with in her life, and I'm telling her some of the things that I was dealing with in my life. I mean, I have a tumultuous time during my life with my dad and stuff, and so I connected with this girl, right? And I couldn't wait for every night that I knew every night that summer we were going to lay out there, and we were going to talk, and nothing ever happened. No kissing, no. We did end up. At some point during the summer, we would lay there and hold hands, which if you can imagine the heart in a 12-year-old boy, this girl reaching over and grabbing your hand is like, oh my goodness, but here's the thing.
Sounded like a Bell 222.
Yeah. I always remember that summer. I mean, because that summer, I had real human connection. I took the risk, right? I took the risk. And the payoff was... this development and forming in my mind of how important it is to connect with other humans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, if you tell me that was the summer you got your first real six string and bought it at the 5 and dime, then I'll.
Oh my goodness!
But that wasn't the summer of '69. It was more like the summer of '89.
Oh
yeah.
I said '89. I was close.
Yeah, this is the summer of '86.
No, but
it doesn't make a good song.
Yeah, summer of 8. Yeah. Nothing rhymes with 86, except being 86th. But
Yeah.
I think that leads us into what's the mistake. The mistake that I see young men making in the dating area is that, and really young women doing this too, because I'm approaching this from like a father trying to impart this advice to. I've got a 9-year-old. He's going to be feeling testosterone here in a couple of years.
Yeah.
That you can't let that be your source of validation. You can't let that throw everything into question. And that's the mistake that I see is guys doing either not taking the risk like you guys were talking about, or their sense of self-worth comes from that at such an early age that it completely makes the idea of relationships with women a toxic idea, that I'm no good at it, I'm not wanted, they don't want me, all women are the same. The first drips of that come from those early experiences. And I really think this is where our young men need their fathers to step up and say, look, your self-worth as a man is dictated by what you do, not by your relationship status. And having a sense of, and my wife loves to say this, that there's a difference between self-worth and being arrogant. That having a sense of your own worth is an important aspect to navigating the world. And Keith, you alluded to this earlier when you pointed out that we're made in God's image. That's your worth there.
Right.
That it's having a sense of self-respect is not the same thing as being arrogant. And being able to differentiate between that if a young lady is not interested in you, if a young woman is not interested in you and having a dating relationship, that does not define your worth, nor does it define her worth, because I know lots of people who weren't interested in each other until they were interested in each other, and then Katie barred the door. But that the reality of that's the sort of, it's not really, I wish I could say it was a roadmap. It's more like a minefield that we're trying to help our kids navigate, is that you can't take your worth from your dating relationships. What would you say are the mistakes? I mean, Kenny, we'll start with you. What mistakes are you seeing young guys making in this arena?
I think one of the biggest mistakes guys make is they don't make any mistakes. They want to be perfect. They don't want to go over any lines. They don't want to. And look, the thing about it is you learn so much from your failures. You learn so much from the things you don't do well. And, you know, the thing about it is none of us are smooth and suave starting out. We all start out as idiots. So embrace the idiotness of it. Embrace
Some of
being
us
bad
remain
for
idiots.
Well, I mean, but I mean, you can learn a lot from other people's failures, but you will not learn nearly as much as the failures that you have yourself. So stop being so worried about doing it right. Just do it. I'm not trying to take anything away.
Well, that was
from
the
Nike.
mantra of our generation, Kenny.
Yeah. Well, I wish people look. You
I
talked
thought
about
it was live long and prosper.
Well, that's true too. You talked about this. People are not letting men be men. Who?
Yeah.
Who's not letting us do that? And whoever that is, that's not somebody you need to be following. Look, if you're waiting for society's okay or stamp of approval, sorry, that's not going to come. It's just not going to come. But
It's deliberately being withheld from you.
Well, yeah, okay. As if I lived for that. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
You will get to a point where and you know, a bunch of women are turning you down because I don't know, you're trying things. You know as well as I do that most women are waiting for somebody who's worth spending some time with, and the people who are worth spending some time with are people who are doing stuff, not for people who are doing nothing. Because people who are doing nothing are not that interesting. So go find people that are trying something. I mean, I enjoyed Star Trek, but I know that there are people who are way deep into it. You know what? They found a passion. Good for them. Those kind of people are a lot more interesting than people who have a passion for nothing. And so, we're talking to Stonehart here, who was all in on music. I tell you what, get Stonehart talking about every episode of Real Deal starts with a piece of music that I've never heard of before. And then Stonehart will tell the story about why that was such an important piece of music to him. Not my passion, not my passion, but I like Stonehart because he's passionate. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I appreciate that. And I like you too, Kenny.
Well, I appreciate that.
And doggone it, we like you.
That's right.
All right, so
God.
Stoneheart, before we
That
transition, before we move into marriage, we're not going to transition here. But
Yeah.
before we move into the topic of marriage, why don't you tell us the mistake you see guys making in the dating?
Well, it's Kenny's answer's first cousin. It is the fact that whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the Me Too movement had a profound effect on men in general. And then when I say men, I'm even as young as the boys now, because now there are new rules for engagement. If you speak to a woman,
Right.
or let's take it to the boy girl range. If a boy speaks to a girl, all that girl has to say is, "I didn't give you consent to speak to me. You're harassing me," right? And now he's a creep, right? If a boy asks a girl out and she rejects him, a lot of times, it becomes like they'll share something about it on their Snapchat or whatever. This guy just asked me out. He's so gross, and so there are all these repercussions for taking the risk and being willing to make mistakes. I mean, dude, we were boneheads when we were kids. I mean, we were like, oh, I wonder if this will work, and you just try whatever you think might work, might help get the girl. That was always the object. And here's the truth: it still is the object. One of the crazy consequences I'm seeing from the Me Too movement is now, Jared, you had mentioned that the marriage age has increased.
Yeah.
There's a large number of young men who aren't getting married at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's
The
just
MGTOW
not
movement,
worth
men going their own way.
Well, it's just not worth the hassle, right? I mean, it's you have all these women out here, promoting this bare minimum thing, right? Well, like if he's just doing the bare minimum, then he ain't worth your time, and all this stuff. And so it's like they're creating more hoops to jump through than just the standard hoops that nature provides, right? And so you've got the natural hoops of entering into a relationship, and now you've got all these additional hoops, and the target keeps getting moved further and further back, right? And so at some point, men are just saying, you know what? Why bother? And now you have a whole generation of what they're calling passport men, right?
Passport bros, yeah.
Yeah, passport bros.
Yeah, passport bros. They're going over to the Philippines, or they're going over to the Ukraine. They're going and they're getting a woman who's to I hate to use this term, but they're a little bit easier. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're a little bit. I mean, it doesn't come with all the extra stuff. And the standards for young men are being raised too. Like, it's not just about all these extra hoops. You've got to look this way. If you've got a few extra pounds, that's unacceptable. You've got to do this. You got to do this. But for the girl, it's all okay, right? She can be a little extra heavy, and hey, body positivity, right? Well, where's that for the young guys? Where's the body positivity for the young guys? When are boys going to be allowed to be comfortable in their own bodies? It's like this whole thing that started, I don't know, 6-7 years ago has really affected men as a whole. And so I think the mistakes that we're making to be Kenny's comments first cousin is that they're afraid to make any mistakes.
Yeah.
There's an irrational fear of rejection. Men already we already understand there's going to be a certain amount of rejection no matter what. As men, we've become accustomed to that, right? We know that very rarely does anything happen on the first try. my wife, had a boyfriend whenever I met her, and so the answer was no. Right? No, I'm persistent, and I wore her down.
Yeah.
but the thing is like, if that were to happen now in 2023, girl says
If
no.
your wife has a boyfriend in 2023, you got a problem, Stonehart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hey, what is she doing? No, but the thing is, I think there's an irrational fear that boys have of being rejected, or because the rejection comes with so many other consequences that they're just not doing anything.
Let me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to transition to something else. Go ahead.
I think one of the things you have to start thinking about is why do men, especially, and I say men, really it's very young men, why do they get into relationships? What are they looking for in relationships? And it has to do usually with something about sex. And
yeah,
I mean, it's that natural attraction, but why do women get into relationship? And it can be about sex, but it's not usually. It's usually they want to have a relationship with somebody that will give them some stability. Guys aren't usually looking for stability. They're not looking for, I mean, at that age, you're just looking forward to the next week. But women traditionally don't look to that. And they're thinking more longer term. By the way, men do better when they find a woman that helps them conceptualize what longer term looks like.
that's right.
And by the way, women also do better when they find a man that will help them appreciate the moments in their lives that are more shorter term. I don't think it's a mistake that God gave men women, and women need men. I think we both desperately need one another, because taken by ourselves, we don't work as well as we potentially could. Now, that said, I was single for a long time, and I had a perfectly fulfilling life like that. But when I got married, things changed, and I look at things differently now. The idea that the Me Too movement did an important thing for a bunch of predatory men, and it made them scared, and it should have, because there are some men who mistreat women and they abuse them, and that's not okay. But the opposite side, there are some women that go out and attack men, and they won't rest until they've decimated them, and that's not okay either. There are extremes. All of these things can be taken to extremes. The MGTOW movement, that can be taken to a big extreme as well. All of these are extreme positions where nobody wants to stay in. Yeah, let's find these male sexual predators. I'm all for that, because those guys are doing me no favors. That's who I want my daughters.
In New York, according to Stonehart.
Yeah, that's who I want my daughters to avoid. I don't want my daughters to become victims. But by the same token, I don't want my sons to become victims either. I want both of them to do well in healthy relationships. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, this is where I had to break in and tell you that you're going to have to wait for the second part of this interview. There was a ton of information and exchanges that you are not going to want to miss, but you're not going to have to wait a full week. Happy to tell you that the second part of this is going to show up on Tuesday. That will be the new day that we drop the Man Up podcast, Tuesdays going forward. So be looking for it this coming Tuesday. So just have to wait a couple of days. As always, until I see you again, have a good day. God bless, and man up.
Dismissed!